Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of High Minded with McCarter. I'm your host, McCarter.
And I'm her co-host, SK. On today's episode, we had a conversation with Zach Hedstrom, the founder of Boulder Mushroom, a local cultivation and distributor of mushrooms, both gourmet and medicinal. He's also working with the City of Boulder to expand his pilot program of soil remediation through mycelium and a pilot program for fire mitigation, also with mycelium.
It was just a really promising and enlightening episode, just learning from a local educator and forager and cultivator of mushrooms. So he sells them to local restaurants that use them for entrees and meals. But then he also makes medicinal mushroom tinctures with turkey tail, lion's mane, and so many more different types of mushrooms. It was so incredible.
Yeah, it was really cool to talk to him about all the ways that mushrooms can save the world. I was really excited to hear that it can work and it's here, and all we need to do is adopt these technologies. And it's not even technology, it's just growing in the world.
This was a truly incredible episode yet again. I feel like I say that every episode, but we just have so many amazing people that are doing incredible things around us. And I was super happy to bring him on, and we learned so much. I can't wait to re-listen to this episode again and learn even more, just because it's hard to take everything in the first time. But shout out to today's episode sponsor, X-Vape. They just launched their new smart flower vaporizer called the Rafu. It is super cool. It comes in blue and gray with a smart panel on the front so you can control the temperature, as well as it uses the highest quality materials. You can save 10% with my code McCarterGetsHigh at xvapeusa.com.
Also, follow us on Instagram at HighMindedPod, and wherever you listen to podcasts, like, subscribe, review. It really does help us out. So thank you so much.
And as always, stay high.
My name is Zach Hedstrom. I'm the owner of Boulder Mushroom. We are a local mushroom farm and environmental remediation business. One side of our business is the cultivation of culinary mushrooms. So we grow mushrooms like lion's mane, oyster mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms. We also cultivate medicinal mushrooms like turkey tail and reishi. We sell to local chefs here in Boulder and abroad. And we also produce medicinal tinctures to be used at home or in combination with other supplements, herbal supplements, things like that. We're also mushroom foragers. So during the season, we go out into the woods and harvest lots of wild mushrooms, which we'll bring back and either provide to our chefs or use for further remediation projects. We actually go out into the woods and culture a lot of those mushrooms, clone them in our laboratory, and then those strains get used for our other remediation projects. Some of that remediation work includes building soil with fungi, using mushroom compost for increasing the biological activity within farm soil, and we also are working in fire mitigation using fungi. So that's a little bit of background about Boulder Mushroom.
Amazing. Wow. I'm so happy you could come on the podcast. Thank you for coming on. We basically just reached out to you on a whim because we saw your article in Boulder Weekly that touched on everything you just said. And I was like, I have to get you on here to spread that knowledge.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And honestly, we just want to get the word out about this work. I mean, everybody likes mushrooms, and I think mushrooms are really having a moment right now in popular culture. But on top of that, I think there's some really important stuff that people need to know that can, really improve our culture as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know where we should jump in. Like, how did you start your business, one, and like know that you wanted to kind of get into these, like, I like to say, like, earth-saving kind of mentality mission?
Yeah, well, so I grew up here in Boulder, and from the time I was a child, I spent a lot of time in the mountains, hiking, and just building a relationship with nature. And from a really young age, I felt that there was a lot to learn from just being within nature and listening and taking note of the patterns that are very obvious and evident when you just spend time in nature. So that was what led me to be interested in mushrooms in the beginning. I was learning plant identification, tree identification, and then naturally I got into mushrooms as well. When I was about 15 years old, I joined the Colorado Mycology Society, which is based out of Denver, and started going out on guided mushroom hunts with local experts. And I started to just learn a lot about the fungal kingdom in general and just how interesting it was and how fascinating it is to be able to go out into the forest and see these mushrooms that only come up for very short periods of time. From that point, I got a little bit into mushroom cultivation as well as alongside my own home gardening practice, growing some herbs, growing some vegetables, and naturally I got into growing mushrooms as well. So at first it was really just a hobby for me, growing mushrooms at home for myself and friends. And we started to do more and more guided mushroom forays in the Boulder area for our local community. And those became really popular and were more popular than I really anticipated they would be. And that just kind of signaled to me that this is something that people are interested in, they want to learn about, and I have some knowledge to offer. So I started to do more and more classes in wild mushroom foraging, mushroom identification, as well as cultivation of mushrooms. And that led me to decide to create Boulder Mushroom, because when a lot of people would come to my classes, we would use mushroom spawn, which is basically the seeds for growing mushrooms that was sourced from maybe Oregon, Washington, the East Coast. And a lot of my students would ask, well, is there any place that I can get this mushroom seed locally? And at that time, there really was none. There was no local spawn provider within Colorado for growing mushrooms. And initially, that was my original idea, is to be a spawn provider, which is basically a seed company for mushrooms. And we started doing that, and it just led to all this other stuff happening and has really just taken off from there.
Amazing. Well, yeah. Oh my God. Where do we even go here?
And so y'all still provide spawns? Is that part of the business model still?
Wait, are
available?
they spores or spawns?
Right. So it's not spores.
Okay.
It's spawn. And the difference is, so I'll give you a little bit of background on biology of a mushroom here.
Amazing.
Mushrooms
Yeah.
start as spores, and spores are like the seeds of fungi, but they're different than plant seeds because it actually takes two seeds to reproduce. So instead of a plant seed that you plant in the ground and then it grows a plant, it takes two fungal seeds to germinate and be compatible and then propagate themselves to form a whole organism. And so that actually makes fungi more like animals and humans than plants, because humans are the same way. It takes two seeds in a way, right, to create a new human being.
Male and female.
That's exactly. And then in fungi, we call them the plus and the minus. They're not boy and girl. They're plus and minus.
Non-binary.
Yeah, non-binary. No judgment.
I like that.
Nice.
Well, it kind of reminds me of positive and negative ions too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the polarity that is the generation of life, right? So
energy.
Exactly. So those mushrooms, the fungi start as an organism, which is called a mycelium. And the mycelium basically permeates whatever environment it grows through. So the spawn, getting back to our original question, the spawn is basically mycelium, which is just growing out on some material, which you can use to introduce to another growing medium to then grow the mushrooms. So our spawn is mycelium. It's not spores, but you could think about it as seeds for mushrooms.
Okay.
And we do still provide that on our website. We sell mushroom spawn. We also sell mushroom grow kits for people that want to just grow mushrooms at home. You can take it and it's literally just cut and spray, and within a couple weeks you have mushrooms growing on your kitchen counter.
It's like those boxes, right? I've been seeing them all over online too. They're getting really popular.
Yes.
Yeah, I had
They
a
are.
shiitake log a couple years ago.
That's what it's called, a
great.
log.
Okay.
A log.
Well,
They make logs too, but
yeah, shiitakes tend to be grown on logs. We grow ours. They're more like a block.
Okay.
So you would get the box, and then it's got a block inside, and you just mist it.
What's the block made of?
is that the substrate?
Yeah, that's the substrate. So it's mostly sawdust. So it's the mycelium is eating the sawdust, but it just looks like a big white block with you can hardly see the sawdust anymore because it's
Wow.
just so ready to produce the mushrooms. And that's
Wow.
happening in nature too. When you go walking around in the woods and you see a log that's kind of rotting away, there's mushrooms or there's fungi growing all throughout that log. It just only shows the mushrooms when the environment is right. And that's
Wow.
when we get rain.
Because
Yeah.
the mycelium is the organism, and then the mushroom is like the sex organ.
Yeah, it's the fruit. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh. Wow. Yeah, I knew it was always called like the fruiting body.
It is the fruiting body.
Wait, but it's actually like a vagina?
Kind of.
Like full of spores.
Yes. Yeah, the spores. I mean, it's
Whoa.
kind of like if humans, if there was only one sex organ that produced all of the different gender seeds out of one. So basically, one mushroom will produce trillions of spores, and those are different genders, basically. And the reason that the mushrooms grow in the rain is because those spores germinate only when it's wet. And so they will germinate, and then they're called hyphae. They're like little taproots of the mushroom spore. They will fuse together when they find a compatible mate, and then they will make the mycelium.
Wow.
Trippy.
Whoa. So sorry, I'm a little bit coming obviously at this from a cannabis perspective, just because I know more about cannabis than other plants and organisms. But like, I guess, can they make new strains if you like just how you make new cannabis strains, basically?
Cross pollinate.
Yeah. Like if you bring a plus of like a lion's mane and then a minus of like a blue oyster or something, like, can you make a new strain?
Yes and no. So we absolutely can make new strains. Lion's mane and oyster mushrooms wouldn't be compatible because they're different species. So that would kind of be like trying to breed
Forgot about that.
cannabis with thistle, which is not going to work.
Right.
Right.
You need the same species.
But if you have two spores within the same species, you absolutely can breed new strains. And that's something that a lot of mushroom breeders do. So we do that in the laboratory on petri dishes, and we germinate spores. And then we can actually look for certain qualities which are good, like vigorous growth or big mushrooms or high yielding strains. So that's one way that we can develop strains.
Okay. So then for obviously high yield is good when you're like selling these to restaurants, because like the more they weigh, the more you can like charge, like the more weight you have, the more money you're getting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then how would you, I guess, measure the same way for like the like soil mitigation you were referring to?
Right. So if we're looking at strains that are going to be used for soil building, some of the factors that we might look at are how vigorous does the strain grow on a certain type of wood. So for example, if we know that we want to be decomposing pine, for example, which has some antifungal resins in it, we might target a specific strain that has the capability to decompose pine more readily. And we can actually, mushrooms are really fascinating because they actually have the ability to invent metabolites, which are an enzyme. So mushrooms, one of the reasons that they're so beneficial for remediation, and one of the reasons why they can be so important in environmental cleanup, is that they can actually invent enzymes which can break down certain chemicals after they've been exposed to them. And this has been shown to be true in various ways. One example is a kind of environmental pollutant called the PAHs, which is the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which includes oil, motor oil. So those compounds are similar in structure to the kind of structural molecule in wood, which the mushrooms eat. And so if you take a mushroom that knows how to eat complex molecules in wood and you expose them to motor oil, they might actually invent an enzyme which can break down the motor oil.
Wow.
And that can also be true for herbicides, heavy metals, other types of contaminants. So that's one of the reasons why they're so beneficial for remediation in general.
Okay, because I've heard
Wow.
of certain mushrooms can eat plastics and things like that. So
Right.
that's what they're targeting, is like the oil in the plastics.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And different strains
This
will
is
eat different
insane.
types. Yeah. Yeah.
So we basically just need to like find all the right mushroom strains to like clean up all of like the pollution.
Yes.
in
Or
our
ones that
world.
are close and get them to create this enzyme. So that
And
they can
you,
do it.
or you can even be training them,
Oh, wow.
some people train dogs. We're training mushrooms
Oh my gosh.
to
So,
decompose.
Well, obviously we're big fans of Paul Stamets here and everything he does, first of all, but like I mean, I obviously got into mushrooms a little bit more after seeing his documentary, Fantastic Fungi, just because it's so eye-opening and the amount of evidence he gives is just so compelling. And so I still follow him on Instagram, and I'm always trying to keep up with like his research. And I just saw that they posted that mycelium have like a vocabulary of 50 words apparently that they can communicate with each other. I'm just like, the stuff we're finding out every day about mushrooms is insane. And I'm just like, they're going to save our planet. They're going to save us.
It's fascinating. And I mean, from a philosophical perspective, right? It's an organism which is so humble. It's unseen most of the time. It's living underground. It's making partnerships with living plants, but yet it's having such an important and vital function in our ecosystem. Just from the perspective of nature, in a intact ecosystem, the fungi are so important. So think about the way that they could, take that one step further and help us remediate some of these human-made problems. And to speak on, what you just brought up, there's other ways that fungi kind of communicate in nature as well. There's a kind of fungi called the mycorrhizal fungi, and they form symbiotic relationships with living plants. And the research has shown that a lot of these plants can't even survive without their fungal partners. These fungi will actually form like a nutrient superhighway in between living plants within the forest. And when a young sapling germinates in the forest floor where there's not much light, the mycelium can actually funnel all the nutrients from the big trees that are photosynthesizing into that baby tree to help the baby tree survive.
Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah.
Wow. If we could take that and extrapolate it to humanity and like communicate
Right.
our needs to each other and be there compassionately.
Right.
It's
It's a lesson.
The dream.
Literally, mushrooms can teach us so much.
Exactly. I mean, some people would say that the mycelium is almost like an externalized brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's also been shown to be like an externalized stomach. That's the way that these enzymes work. They're excreting the enzymes that break down their food externally, as opposed to us that take our food inside of us.
Wow. So, I mean, obviously, we've created a lot of problems in the world that need to be cleaned up. If we were to implement mushrooms as like the front lines to do this, what would a timeline look like on doing remediation for like a garbage dump?
Well, as soon as possible is what I would say. But yeah, I mean, so some of the different ways that the fungi can help us with these human-made problems and help us with remediation. One example is creating soil out of waste products. Mm-hmm. So, for example, here in Boulder, we have a lot of natural disasters that take place. We've had floods, we've had fires, and those natural disasters, they create a lot of biomass, which generally can be pretty hard to know what to do with. There's certain ways that we can try to deal with it, like chipping it up and giving it away for a community mulch pile or things like that. But in general, it's pretty hard to understand what we really should be doing with this material. And one of my proposals in terms of a solution is to take the material and to introduce fungi into it, which is what would happen in nature anyway. The fungi would make its way into the wood. But when we introduce the fungi purposefully, we can actually make it so that this material can turn into soil extremely rapidly. Mm-hmm. We had a trial that we ran here in Boulder County at a local farm, and we had 3 test plots where we had just 100% wood chips that we inoculated with different local fungi, fungal strains that we gathered ourselves and grew out into a lab and then applied them into the wood chips. And then we had one control pile. And what we found is that the inoculated wood chips held, so much more moisture than the control pile, almost double the amount of moisture in the inoculated piles. And they decomposed very rapidly compared to the control pile. Our pile that wasn't inoculated, the leaves inside of it hadn't even decomposed. And the ones that had the fungi inside were well on their way to soil. Wow. They were dark, they were wet, they had visible hyphae inside of them. So that's one example of how we can purposefully introduce a native microorganism and facilitate a process that would already be happening in nature and just speeding it up substantially.
Nice.
Wow.
And so you're proposing through the City of Boulder to do that on a large scale?
Yeah, and we actually are already starting. So those piles were somewhat small. It was like a pilot project. And then this year we're going to be scaling that up a lot more. We're working with a local organization here in Boulder, and we're doing, instead of 20-foot long piles, we're doing 75-foot long piles that are going to be 8 feet wide and 4 feet high. So that's a pretty substantial amount of material there.
Yeah.
And we're going to be measuring not only how fast they decompose and how much moisture they hold and how much fungi can be growing in them, but also will they produce any food in the form of mushroom? And then also, is that pile going to be remediating the surrounding soil? We actually decided to do this time in a degraded old corral in East Boulder that was kind of overgrazed, and the soil's very rocky and degraded. And so we're going to be looking at, can these fungi actually help to remediate the existing soil as well as build new soil?
Yeah. Wow.
Whoa. So with using fungi in the soil, could you use it at the same time that you're growing crops, or is it like every other year you would do the fungi to like replenish the soil?
No, you can actually use it in combination with crops, and that's one of the other benefits.
Whoa.
Because so what's happening, the way that you can think about this fungi is like a big sponge on the soil. When it's eating up these wood chips, it's actually holding water in its cells, and it's helping to mitigate the loss of the water. So one of the uses for this material that the farm that we worked with is doing is to take these wood chips and mulch around trees that they've planted, fruit trees.
Yeah.
Especially because in our environment, a lot of the year can be very dry and very hot. This is a climate of extremes. Our winters are cold, our summers are hot and dry. Sometimes we get a lot of moisture at certain times of the year. So that can be really hard to deal with as a farmer who's trying to make a living, growing food. And so this farm that we've worked with planted a couple hundred trees in 2020. And I think like more than half of them actually died just because they didn't have the water that they needed when they were planted. So, what that farm has now started to do is when they plant trees, they also plant the mycelium at the base of the tree. And what that does is it creates a sponge at the base of the tree and helps hold water in place. And, one extension of this in terms of the cannabis industry, so cannabis can be very demanding in terms of its water use, right? And that's just kind of a known thing. To be able to plant cannabis, for example, in a soil which also has a higher fungal content, can help to mitigate some of that water usage and actually cut back on the amount of water that it takes to grow.
Wow. So it can just like tap into that fungi and just like slurp it up like
There's like 50 times more water or 50% more water than there would be just available.
And even just helping that water, not evaporate in hot weather.
This is nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I need this on my lawn. I need this everywhere.
Wait, but
Exactly.
what type of, does it matter what type of fungi you're using?
Yeah, there's various types of fungi. So the type that I'm talking about right now are wood decomposing fungi. And the reason is just because we're using wood-based mulch. So on the ground, what it looks like is putting down a wood mulch and then inoculating it with a wood-eating fungus. That is what's creating a sponge. There are other types of fungi that we can use as well. For example, ones that will grow in compost or in manure, or even the mycorrhizal fungi, which form a symbiotic relationship with the plant. So all of these different types of fungi can help to boost the survival rates of some of these plants in different ways.
Okay.
Wow.
What I'm wondering is if you can get, I'm always like, I want to kill two birds with one stone, So like, can you use like turkey tail, like plant it with cannabis, and then while it's like feeding the cannabis water, it also has this fruiting body that you can harvest later? Is that possible?
In theory, yes. It's a little bit more tricky.
Okay.
Because for the fungi to actually produce mushrooms, it needs certain things in the environment. It needs humidity and it needs moisture. And sometimes, for example, if you were growing cannabis, you might not want as much humidity in there as, the mushroom might want to grow, because you might be bringing in some mold or something like that. But in theory, you absolutely can do that. And I know some folks that grow certain types of mushrooms that favor the kind of environment that a plant would want to grow in. And so they are getting that dual benefit. Another example of how you can use this is especially in indoor plant cultivation, such as, cannabis growing, CO2 is very necessary, right? And a lot of growers, large-scale growers, will actually need to inject CO2 into their growing room in order to have proper plant growth. Now, fungi are similar to humans in that they inhale oxygen and they exhale CO2. And so one of the more natural solutions to that is to actually have blocks of fungi inside of a growing room, specifically for the purpose of exhaling CO2 for the plants to breathe in.
Genius.
Right.
That's really cool.
But those mushrooms or those blocks of fungi could also be producing mushrooms for you at the same time.
Right.
Yep.
A win-win. I love a
Win-win.
win-win.
Yep.
That is amazing. Okay, well, I definitely also want to talk about like medicinal values to just certain like mushrooms in general, like turkey tail and lion's mane. Because I know that, wait, I always get this wrong. Well, Paul Stamets, again, he treated his mother or grandma with one of them
With turkey
Yes.
tail.
with turkey tail to treat
Breast cancer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
she's like still alive and amazing. And
That's right.
So
Yeah, some of these medicinal
yeah.
mushrooms are incredible in the things that they can do. So if you want to talk about turkey tail, for example, turkey tail has been shown to substantially boost the immune function. That's kind of its baseline use as a tonic. So just to get into herbal vocabulary for a second, you have tonics, which basically help the body to keep a homeostasis, which is healthy. Then you have actual targeted treatments for specific ailments like cancer. And you also have preventative, and then you have once the issue is already in place and you're actually trying to treat it. So turkey tail has been shown to be a preventative against cancer. It has activity against various types of tumor growth. Breast cancer is one of those. There are also various other types of cancer that turkey tail is active against. I'm not going to get into all of the details of how that occurs, but there's been a lot of research that has shown that taking turkey tail on a regular basis can prevent tumor growth and also reduce existing tumor.
Wow.
There's a drug in Asia which is approved by the governments of China and Japan, called Crestin. And Crestin is an anti-cancer drug that is used pretty widely, and it's derived from the turkey tail mushroom. There are various types of compounds in there that are active against cancers, but this compound is called polysaccharide K. It's a polysaccharide which inhibits tumor growth. And so that was extracted from the turkey tail and then approved by the Japanese and Chinese government as a natural solution.
Wow.
So yeah, that's
Do you
an
think
example.
that is the FDA like considering this already?
Are there any drugs that are being
I don't know what
restricted?
they're considering in terms of herbal medicine and naturally derived products. I would just say that the United States is pretty far behind. Asia has a lot longer history of using plants and mushrooms for treatments, and so they respect those treatments a lot more. Here in the U.S., we're not quite as far along, but I think we've made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, for example. So I hope so.
Wow. So what about this tincture that you brought here? Which one does it kind of
So this
treat or-
this tincture is a turkey tail tincture. So it's extracted turkey tail, and it is a dual extraction. So when we extract herbs, there's two main ways that we can extract the medicinal compounds. One is water and the other is alcohol. So a dual extraction means that you do both and then you mix it together. And that helps you get the broad spectrum benefits of both those water soluble and alcohol soluble compounds. And we can mix those into tinctures that have other beneficial herbs, CBD, for example, or anything. We can also mix various mushrooms together, but this is just a concentrated turkey tail right there.
Right, so
Okay.
this has the polysaccharide.
Yeah,
K.
right.
Okay.
Wait,
Right.
so it
Nice.
says organic vodka
Yep.
water. So
Yep.
is this actually like alcohol, like any percentage of alcohol then?
Yes. Yeah. And that's one of the things that makes a tincture shelf stable, is to have a certain percentage of alcohol.
Okay.
You could think about if you left a cup of tea on your cabinet for a month, it might go stale, but vodka doesn't, right? So that's another benefit of using alcohol in extraction, is that it makes these shelf stable.
And now time for a quick commercial break. Today's sponsor is X-Vape. Check out their new Rafu Smart Flower Vaporizer that uses the highest quality materials and has a smart interface that you can control the temperature yourself. Check them out
At xvapeusa.com, use code McCarterGetsHigh to save 10%. Turkey tail has a lot of benefits. Lion's mane.
what about lion's mane?
Lion's mane is a big
that?
one. Yeah, lion's mane is a really powerful medicinal mushroom as well. And so while turkey tail targets immune system function and is protective against cancer, the lion's mane mushroom is targeting the nervous system. So there's been research that shows that lion's mane mushroom actually helps to regenerate nerve tips. So lion's mane mushroom can help us with neurological issues, such as fatigue, brain fog, overall slowness. It can also help with any illness or...
I heard it could possibly treat Alzheimer's.
Yeah, can it really recreate the myelin on dendrites?
Yes. Yep. There
Wait,
is...
the what on what?
The
let
like
you say
sheath on the nerve endings,
The myelin
sheath.
Yeah.
It deteriorates, and that's what can cause dementia and Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
So
So-
it's the only thing that can regenerate.
It regenerates the tip of the nerve.
Wow.
That's right.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's right. There's other things, for example, like neuropathy. That's a ailment that my grandfather actually deals with, and that's a neurological issue that leads to pain just because of the nerve degeneration. So that's another example.
What about something like ALS? Do you think mushrooms, any type of mushroom could
I don't know so much about that one, but I do know that, I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
So
There has to be one out there to help.
I know I've heard of someone with ALS who uses a psilocybin lion's mane duo daily, like a small microdose of both. To treat it.
Another one that I've heard about with lion's mane is tinnitus, which is the ringing in ears.
Okay.
That a lot of times happens to musician. I myself am a drummer, so I take lion's mane as a preventative because my hearing, could be a little better than it is. But I don't really know a lot of the science behind it, but I do know that there's been a lot of people that have reported their tinnitus being cured just by taking lion's mane. And it's related to that nerve regeneration.
And how much do you obviously we are not doctors. This is all entertainment, educational purposes.
Indeed.
These are all
Speculative.
still under trials and stuff. So
yeah, we say it's all for entertainment purposes on the podcast. So
Right.
we can't get sued.
That's good.
But how much theoretically would you need to be taking every day, milligram wise? Because I was taking this because you can buy lion's mane, whatever, at Whole Foods, tablets and stuff. Is just taking one or two of those.
I'm sure you guys have a tincture.
Yeah, you're obviously your products would be amazing to plug here. What do you recommend for milligram or dosage? Because I know that's just so foreign to people. Of, how much do I need?
Well, so it depends. And it depends on a few things. One, it depends what you're using it for. So if you're using an herb such as a medicinal mushroom as a preventative, you might just decide to take a smaller dosage daily. If you're actually choosing to treat an ailment that you have, you may be taking a higher dosage maybe multiple times a day until you're actually seeing results.
Sure.
The other consideration is how the product is produced. And so since I don't have a really good indication of exact number of milligrams for that purpose, I'll just talk a little bit about the different ways that products can be produced. So for example, this tincture is 100% mushroom. It's extracted with a mushroom, and it is extracted using water and alcohol. Now, other products are produced using mycelium. And so instead of extracting the compound out of the mushroom, they'll extract it out of the mycelium. But the mycelium generally has a carrier because mycelium needs to grow on something.
Right.
And so the most common carrier is some kind of grain, like a brown rice. And so there are some products out there that have elevated content of grain as a byproduct of the production of mycelium. And so, for example, there are some products out there that are powder, right? But it's not 100% mushroom powder. It's actually powder of a myceliated grain.
Okay.
And so in that,
Is that cheaper for them to produce?
it is absolutely cheaper. It's
Knew it.
absolutely cheaper.
Well, it's
Cutting
probably
costs.
a lot easier to harvest it too. It's like instead of
correct.
having to wait for the mushrooms to pop
Yes.
and harvesting those.
And I will give it to them
yeah.
that mycelium has been shown to have a lot of active compounds within it, and some mycelium actually has compounds that fruiting bodies do not have. But I think that the thing to consider is that not everybody is trying to consume that much starch while they are treating themselves. And so I think it's important to be straightforward and to just know the differences. And so, if we produce powder, it's the powder of a mushroom. It's not powder of a myceliated grain. And if we're doing a liquid tincture, then we're extracting from a mushroom instead of extracting from the mycelium for that reason.
Okay. Because I've
Interesting.
heard some negative stuff about companies like Host Defense. Is that what they're doing?
I don't know the specifics of what the individual businesses do, but I do know that that is one of the contentious points, like within the industry, is just how do we do
Yeah.
extractions?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And like once it's large scale, it's probably a lot easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
There's not much oversight.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so, it's not that those products are necessarily lower quality. It's just you need to understand like the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a lot of misconceptions with cannabis oil versus like if it's like hemp seed oil, because that contains no cannabis plant benefits.
Right.
So I was kind of wondering if it was a similar thing of like if it's a mycelium extraction, if it wouldn't get as many benefits as if it was extracted from like the mushroom like fruiting body.
Yeah. My sense, and this is a little bit speculative, but that it would be lower concentration
That makes
is
sense.
what it comes down to.
So when it says turkey tail mushroom on the ingredients list, for sure it's
That's
coming
correct.
from a mushroom. Nice.
Yeah.
But like, how do you know how concentrated this is, or like, because it doesn't say like milligram. I'm only going off of milligrams because all of the cannabis and CBD and tinctures are milligrams.
Well,
Right.
And yeah, so
A tincture is probably,
But
Yeah,
like,
so
how do you measure
So what
that?
we
Yeah.
suggest with the tinctures that we make, because we weigh out, enough mushrooms into the batch so that there's a substantial amount of mushroom per dropper full. So our suggestion is that if you're taking it as a regular tonic, you would basically just take one dropper full in the morning, and then maybe one in the evening if you want. But if
and that's under your tongue, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. So you take one full dropper under your tongue 1 to 2 times a day. However, if I can feel myself getting sick, I'll take that tincture 6 to 7 times a day.
Oh,
And I will generally not be sick for more than 1 to 2 days.
Wow.
wow.
So there's also, that's the difference between preventative versus active treatment, right?
Okay, got it.
Nice. And the immune function,
Yeah.
you notice it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
absolutely.
my gosh, I'm about to buy these all for my family
Good.
members. I'd be
Yeah.
like, you better take these all
Get
the
a little
time.
gift
Yeah.
basket. Yeah, yep, I've got all my
Well,
family
and
on
because
it too.
Alzheimer's, my grandma had Alzheimer's
Yeah.
for 10 years
Yeah.
before she died. And it was, my mom is like, that's like her worst nightmare.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
her some lion's mane.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know.
Oh no, I have her taking lights. Well, that's why I asked, because I've had her taking I bought her the Whole Foods, just tablets that I was like, just take this every morning with your daily, adult vitamins,
Right.
whatever. But I do have her taking a CBD tincture now every night. And she's done it for like a year or two now. And she notices her sleep is a million times better than it was in the past.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep incorporating all these plant-based medicine things.
That's
into
good, and I think that's kind of for us. It's of a younger generation. It's good that we're introducing our parents and grandparents to this stuff, because I think about that a lot. For the generation that maybe has just recently passed, and they didn't have access to any of this information
It's so
back in the
sad.
day. Traditional medicine, traditional herbal medicine was more prevalent, even in the United States, just out of necessity. But, with the advent of, modern living and the pharmaceutical industry and all of that,
yeah.
it's become less accessible for people. And I think that, has, in my opinion, been connected to some quality of life issues that I think it's time to start to address.
Oh, definitely.
absolutely.
So do you think mushrooms have any place with treating like pain for humans? Because I know that obviously that's a huge issue that, well, we're always talking about Dope Sick that was on Hulu, and just like the opioid epidemic in general. And if there's any way that like a mushroom or a plant can, help treat pain that so many people have that are trying to like not feel any pain.
Or even emotional pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
trauma,
is
depression.
there...
I just actually read an article about mushrooms. They were able to figure out what part of psilocybin mushrooms stops depression.
What?
Yeah, that's the article I just sent you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think I really have the ability to speak on mushrooms for pain relief specifically, just because I don't know enough about it. But I do know that from that emotional perspective, there's a lot of ways that just having a better functioning immune system, a better functioning nervous system can help us, cope with the daily life that we deal with. If our immune system or if our nervous system is really tense or it's not functioning the way that it should be, it can just be harder overall to deal with some of the challenges of life. I mean, life is challenging and it's full of trials. And I think that I just think about it as being like a robust human,
Sure.
And, we have to be able to manage what comes our way. And so being healthy and being, well adapted is a good way to cope with that. There's other mushrooms like reishi and cordyceps that have been shown to really boost like just overall performance in day-to-day life. Cordyceps mushrooms actually help the body uptake more oxygen. And so on a cellular level, we can have more oxygen, per cell.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of athletes.
Ignore bacon barking in the background.
Yeah, a lot of athletes take cordyceps to like enhance their performance and things like that. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Wait, what about chaga? Because I know you talk about chaga.
I do drink chaga in the morning sometimes.
What do you
with my
have
coffee.
to say about chaga?
I love chaga. I love to take chaga. I don't have quite as much to say on its benefits just because it's not one that we really cultivate. It's more of a wild crafted mushroom and it's more of an East Coast mushroom. It grows on birch trees, which we don't really have here. But it's just another really good antioxidant mushroom. It does have anti-cancer properties that various studies have shown. So, they're all great.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like if you're... I know, I'm like, hold on.
So
sorry.
Take a pause, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Bacon.
Yeah, me and my roommate are trying to get into foraging this year and looking for morels, elms and ashes. Are those common around here? Is it easy to find?
Yeah, elm and ash is kind of common, but our environment is different, so we don't really find as many morels around elms. It tends to be around like cottonwoods.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Cottonwoods around here or just in general?
Around here.
Okay.
Yeah, in Colorado, we have 3 different types of morels. We have yellow morels, black morels, and burn morels.
Okay.
So the yellow morels grow down in the creeks with the cottonwoods. And the black morels grow up in the mixed conifer forest, and then the burn morels grow in the forest fire burns.
Okay. Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
And now's the season for morels?
It's just starting.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little early, but it's coming.
Good.
It's coming.
Yeah, I don't want to be late. So
it's easy.
early.
It's easy to be late.
It seems like the seasons come and go.
They do.
You have a week. And
But our season actually lasts probably 3 to 4 months. But you have to be sensitive to the changes. So the thing about Colorado foraging is that we chase it up in elevation.
Oh, okay.
So we start early in the spring down in the plains around 5,000 feet elevation, 5,500 feet. And then we actually chase it all the way up to about 11,000 feet elevation in late August, early September.
Wow.
So as it warms up in the mountains, the mushrooms start to fruit higher and higher.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Mushrooms are having a moment, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's exciting.
I mean, I think that with any fad, there are people that are going to just treat it as that. But I think that there's a bigger thing going on where people are acknowledging some of the benefits. And those benefits aren't just going to go away when people move on to the next thing.
Right.
Also, it's kind of cool. It's on the political left, the political right. It's kind of everywhere in society all at once.
Yep. That's an interesting thing that I will speak to. That's kind of funny about being a mushroom farmer. Mm-hmm. Colorado is pretty split politically. We're in Boulder right now, and it's much more left wing. And so when I'm selling mushrooms in Boulder, a lot of times I talk about mushrooms as substitute for meat or as a vegetarian protein option or as a vegan option. And a lot of people like that. But I'll also sell mushrooms out in Weld County by Greeley, where it's all cattle ranchers and farmers. And I recently sold mushrooms at an event, which was basically a Colorado beef event. And it shifted 180. And all I was saying is mushrooms are great on steak.
Yeah.
They're great on steak. But the funny thing...
That's how I first got introduced to mushrooms.
Right?
Was mushrooms, like sauteed mushrooms with a good steak. And I was oh my God, this is epic.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian, so I don't have any problem saying mushroom steak is pretty good. But, even for the vegans, it's they like it for different reasons. But what I was going to say is what's kind of fun about it is that even within those pretty conservative circles, there's still the benefits. They acknowledge the benefits. For example, knowing that their soil on their farm might be getting depleted and they need ways to boost up their production on the farm.
Yeah.
That's one example. Another example is just, people care about their grandparents and their great grandparents and they want their grandparents to be healthy. And I had, an experience where we were selling lion's mane to a really conservative family just to help their grandparents, not get dementia and Alzheimer's. So I think that on all sides of the spectrum, there's benefits for everybody, even if they don't agree on other things.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Mushrooms, like certain types of edible, like medicinal mushrooms are one of the main things in Alex Jones's like longevity stuff. So like it's been a big thing on the right for a second. The first time I ever saw like ground mushrooms as like a coffee substitute, it was with very conservative people.
Yeah.
They were like, this was like 10 years ago. They were like, who needs coffee? We have mushrooms. I was like, y'all are crazy. This is not going to last. And now here we are.
Wait, that's
here we are.
So interesting.
Benefit from it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of fungi, I don't remember what this is called, but
Fungi, right?
I'm sorry. Wait, I always say I'm so wrong with how I
You can say either
fungi,
one.
Not to.
There's
sorry,
no
not to-
judgment here.
fungus, fungi. With fungi, I think we've talked about this before very briefly. There's like something that I thought it was a fungi that can be grown in your body that like takes over your mind and makes you like eat certain things. Candida.
Wow. That's scary.
Candida.
Do you know about this?
It's not a mushroom. It's like some sort of like yeast.
It
parasite.
is a yeast. I'm sorry, I got confused.
Yeah.
I get yeast in mushrooms.
But chaga combats it. Allegedly. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about this?
I mean, I don't actually know anything about that. I'm going to have to look it up. I do know that certain, cordyceps mushrooms, they do that with ants. The ants will get infected with the cordyceps mushroom. It'll actually make them go crazy and they'll climb to the top of a tree and then die. And then the mushroom pops out of their head and it makes them climb to the top of a tree so that the spores can disperse as far as they can. Yep.
No
So you've heard about this. Yeah.
It's really
It's
wild.
trippy.
There's videos. You can watch it. It's really, really nuts.
So
And it
do
just-
you think mushrooms are at all controlling humans and getting us to like cultivate them further, kind of with like Michael Pollan's theory?
That's a good question. I wonder about that. Yeah, I guess I've probably inhaled enough spores over the years that they're probably controlling me in some way.
Yes, they are.
So that's, on the one side, but you could say that about potatoes, have potatoes
True.
taken over humans. I don't know.
different times in history,
I don't know
maybe,
about that.
yeah.
Maybe.
Or cheese.
Yeah, cheese. Yeah, people are crazy about cheese. I don't know. McDonald's.
I don't know. I just want to talk about mushrooms in the future possibly taking over the world.
Well, I think that they are in a way, and I think that, what is going to happen is that human beings are going to acknowledge more and more of the benefits of mushrooms to remediate some of our issues. I mean, when you think about environmental catastrophes, right, there are organisms that come to help remediate whatever catastrophe happens. And I think that it's no secret to anybody that there's an aspect of human culture that's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the contents of our soil, it's
Yes.
like it's nothing. We've
Right.
taken it from this substantial, like life-giving force to completely devoid of.
Exactly. And
Right.
so if
now
you think
there's
about
plastic
that,
and everything. So and there's plastic in our body.
our bodies.
We're plastic.
Yeah.
So do
Right.
you think, well, I know that we talked about earlier that some mushrooms are going to be able to eat plastic. Do you think that's going to be possible for them to like eat the plastic out of our bodies and or eat the plastic out of the ocean?
Yeah, I was gonna say, how
Gosh.
do we treat the oceans with mushrooms?
Yeah.
That's a
yeah.
good question. Now, I don't know if I can get as far as to say that it's going to eat mushroom or eat plastic out of our bodies. I would be happy
That's my
if it
dream.
could
I'm
do
trying
that.
to manifest it.
Gosh, yeah. Well, if you can do that, I'll be on board.
We're going to team up and figure it out.
Okay, we will. Sounds good. I'm on. But in terms of the ocean thing, I think that, it's just a matter of working with more fungi and trying to figure out which fungi actually have the ability to decompose plastic, because I think that they've got to be out there. Plastic is based in molecules that certain fungi can eat, and it's just about finding the one that really is our best tool. And so, I've thought about that a lot. How do you deal with the microplastics? How do you deal with the big plastics and all of that? I think that there's various ways to go about it. But, if we have a real concerted effort to actually remove the large scale plastic in the ocean and then maybe grind it up and inoculate it with some kind of fungus, that could be one option. One solution that Paul Stamets has proposed for oil spills is actually putting out big boats or buoys into the water that actually are sucking the contaminant out of the water and decomposing it. So if there was a plastic eating fungus that could do that, that could be really substantial.
Oh my gosh.
Or even just various filtration type of things.
Sure.
There is one thing that was in his book Mycelium Running, where there was a cattle farm that had a lot of runoff from their manure, and so there was an E. coli problem which was developing in the water.
Oh yeah.
And so they utilized one fungus that actually can eat E. coli, or at least catch it in its net. And they were filtering all the water through it, and it actually was remediating the water.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of ways to go about it, but
I think that's going to be huge because I've been hearing more and more that obviously water and clean water is becoming a bigger issue.
Yeah.
And
just using the mycelium soil for drought mitigation and stuff. That's huge.
Yeah.
If we can save 50%
yeah,
more water every time.
Or maybe be able to use mushrooms
soil.
to grow in other places that you couldn't even grow,
right?
Because there wasn't any water.
Oh yeah, no, I saw a story that was really fascinating, and it kind of speaks just to that in Syria there was a community that had been bombed out, and so there was no food available, hardly, and basically no infrastructure. And this guy was literally growing mushrooms in an old parking garage or in a basement, and he was feeding his community with mushrooms. And I think it had taken him 2 years or something to culture that mushroom with no lab or anything. Think about that. That's almost ants, hive mind, we're going to survive one way or another and with what's available to us.
Wow. So do you think humans could survive off of just mushrooms if that was if the meat became we couldn't eat meat anymore?
That's a good question. I think that we could phase out meat and replace it with mushrooms. I don't know if I would want to have 100% mushroom diet.
Okay.
But
okay.
Yeah, it's I'm going to need some leaves in there.
Yeah, a little bit of leaves, maybe some rice or something. But I definitely think that we could be eating substantially more mushrooms, and it would probably benefit us.
Wow. So cool.
So with fire mitigation, you're working with the city to
Well, as of right
trials.
now, we're not yet working with the city. We're working with some local organizations that do fire mitigation. And basically the concept there, to keep it really simple, is when we do fire mitigation in forests that have a lot of fuel, basically we're just removing some of that excess fuel to reduce the risk of a mega wildfire forming.
This is the raking of forests.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why some of these fires have been so massive.
Mm-hmm.
Wildfires are a naturally occurring phenomenon, but what's not natural is when they burn so huge and so hot and so intensely. And so a big focus for mitigating future megafires is removing excess fuel out of the forest. But then the question arises, what do you do with it? And so what my proposal is to look at the normal way that ecosystems function and the cycling of carbon. Carbon is supposed to be cycled back into the soil. Mm-hmm. That's what happens. And fungi are some of the major players that help do that. So our proposal is to use fungi to deal with fire mitigation slash that is generated from fire mitigation, instead of burning it or taking it down to a landfill or for a community mulch pickup, to actually put it back on the ground and to inoculate it with organisms that have the ability to transform it back into soil. So that's a big area of focus for us right now, and we're planning some substantial trials.
That's
this
so
year.
Cool. So how long does something like that take for once the ground is inoculated? like how long until it's like actual like usable soil, I guess?
Well, that's a good question. It's kind of what we're trying to figure out. But what I know from our trials down here at our local farm is that within 1 year, the inoculated wood chips were turning black. They were holding moisture. They were crumbling between your fingers. So they were substantially on their way to soil, whereas the non-inoculated chips were just dry and they looked just like wood chips.
Wow.
So, that's part of what we're going to be measuring with the trial is measuring the decomposition
some
of the
data.
chips. Yeah, exactly. It's all in the data.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right
And
now.
then light some fires, see if it
Yeah,
holds.
well, we'll see about
Light
that.
it up.
Controlled fires.
Yeah, controlled burn. We would be interested in to do that because actually that's part of the argument, right? Is that the wood chips if they're actually holding moisture in the wood chips in the soil
They're actually fighting the fire instead of
Yeah.
fueling
in
it.
place,
It
and that
shouldn't
would be
even, like, burn.
really substantial.
Wow,
So
yeah.
so I would love to do that at some point in a safe way.
Whoa.
Cool. Wow, that's
Oh my
so
gosh,
cool.
this is amazing.
So yeah, the droughts, the fires, the garbage that we've accumulated all can be remediated with.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait,
right.
so then the other thing is like kind of with like the CO2 levels in the atmosphere and kind of like the air quality. Can mushrooms help? How can they help with? Because I know they produce oxygen, like we said. So like,
Or they produce carbon.
yeah,
or,
they
I'm sorry,
produce CO2.
They're like us. They take in oxygen and
That's right.
release CO2. So
Yep.
like, is there any way that are they cleaning the air as they do that, or are they not really like helping the atmosphere at all?
Well, they're
Well,
like us.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, they're breathing in oxygen, they're breathing out CO2.
Is it clean CO2?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's definitely cleaner than a diesel truck.
Right. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, how do you compare?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that I don't really know much about. But in terms of the carbon sequestration concept, that's kind of one of the things to consider is that when you take all that 100% carbon material, if you burn it, which a lot of crews do when they're doing fire mitigation, you're releasing that CO2 into the environment.
Right.
When you turn it into soil, you're sequestering carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the concept that we're trying to talk about when we're looking at carbon sequestration.
Packing it back in the
Put
earth.
it back in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Put
'cause-
it in the earth.
Yeah, we had someone in the past come in and talk about carbon-based nutrients for plants.
Yeah.
And how much better they are than nitrate-based. Like,
Yeah, well, I think in
super
agriculture
cool.
in general, we're moving past the mindset that it's just nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus being responsible for the plant growth. It's actually a lot of microorganisms and microbial activity in the soil that generates some of that nutrition. And from a fundamental level, what the fungi do is they decompose these big molecules like lignin, which is the structural molecule in wood, and unlock available plant nutrients. That's how they recycle wood back into soil. I mean, that's what happens when a tree falls down in the forest and turns back into dirt.
Mm-hmm.
The molecules in the tree are being broken apart by fungi and turning into nutrients for new plants to use.
Yeah.
cool. And then they're communicating all those nutrients down
Right.
the line to the new ones.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
But they can also carry them too. So they're communicating and carrying.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Such skill.
I want-
Jedis.
Yeah, I'm like,
True.
Jedis of the
I want
earth.
to
Yeah.
be a mushroom.
yeah.
How do we make ourselves? Well, I guess once we die, I just want to be like, sprinkle me into the
Right.
into a forest.
Into the ether, yeah. It's
Yeah, or like inoculate my ass with.
That's a thing. That's a thing now.
Yeah.
They're inoculating bodies.
Is
Yeah,
that
totally.
can that be a new like business?
Go
thing
sign
for
up
you?
for it. I don't know. I don't know if I want to deal in the dead bodies.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, I
the-
heard only certain cities are like allowing it too.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Boulder's one of them. You can make
Like,
yourself
if you're
into a
gonna
tree.
get any licenses, like don't waste your time on that yet. It's like there's bigger fish to fry. at
Maybe
this point.
someday,
Yeah.
but
well,
yeah. Leave that to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, one kind of small question with psilocybin, with it being decriminalized in Denver, like, do you at all seeing it become legal and you guys even growing it in the future if it is legal?
Well, this is what I think is going to happen. There's so much interest now with psilocybin, and I think that we're really acknowledging the fact that our laws haven't really been accurately reflecting what this substance is. Especially when we really look at the trials that have been done in places like Johns Hopkins University and read those reports of people that have had life-changing experiences. My view is that the psilocybin is almost like a remediator for the mind. The mushrooms
Yes.
can remediate various things. And I think from a spiritual
Trauma.
perspective, a lot of humans need remediated in their spirits. So I think
Yes.
that it's a good thing that, we're starting to look at this more carefully. I think it's going to be a long process, and we are not involved with that process in any way. There's way more work that we can do comfortably and easily that we don't really need to be involved in that. But I really do applaud the people that are putting their time and energy into kind of re-evaluating this as something that can help human culture and not be demonized or something that's gonna, cause harm to people. I mean, I'm an advocate of looking at indigenous traditions and trying to understand how did those indigenous traditions benefit those societies. And obviously, the most traditional use of psilocybin mushrooms was within indigenous communities in Central America and in other parts of the
like
world.
a ceremonial
Exactly.
perspective.
So I think that that's the way that we need to be looking at it, as how can this be something that can help people either with depression or with their own spiritual mindset. So I'm happy to see that things are changing in that direction.
Yeah, me too. It is very exciting.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, the article I just read said that the reason that it can change the human mind is that it breaks down the rigidity of our neural pathways and can make them, like, neuroplasticity just increases hugely.
Right.
With the mushrooms.
Which kind of fits into the broader pattern that we're talking about of
Mm-hmm.
all these fungi kind of helping to break down things that we don't need anymore and build things that we want.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make us adaptive to the future.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's like so true. Because we need to evolve with these mushrooms.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think that, back to your question of what's the future of this, I mean, I think that we are going to evolve with the mushrooms, and I think that they're going to help us evolve into a more developed version of our species. I mean, I hope that in, hundreds of years, as we move forward as a species, we'll look back at this phase of our culture, which caused so much damage to this planet, and look back at ourselves as children, because that's really what it is. As much as we think that we've made so much progress by building all these big cities and extracting fossil fuels and increasing production of material goods, it's like, what are we really doing? Are our spirits happy? Is our planet happy? Are we burning down our own house? Mm-hmm. So I think that that's where, when you look at the future, hopefully this can help make us more evolved versions of where we are now.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And kind of with that, I just remembered recently I've seen some, like, it looks like plastic packaging, but then it says like biodegradable, made from mushrooms and stuff like that. So I feel like I've seen a lot of things that give me hope for the future of, like, mushrooms already being used, to make, like, plastic substitutes, and hemp being used to make, like, a concrete substitute. And so I just really want to see that trend continue and not die off.
Me too. I think what it comes down to is, living in harmony with biology and living with biological solutions. I think that if I were to try and define this age, or at least try and influence people to think about this age of human history in a certain way, I would say the age of biological solutions, to the problems that we have caused by fighting nature instead of working with nature.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow, harmony instead of opposition.
Right.
Truly.
Right.
What can, like, your everyday person do to help this
Good question.
shift, like help transition to a more biological perspective?
Yeah, well, on the one level, I think just learning about this stuff is, good. I mean, we offer a lot of classes either in growing mushrooms or in foraging mushrooms, and just, learning about this type of stuff and building a relationship with nature. I think that that's actually what I would say is the biggest benefit, other than any specific thing, is to build a relationship with nature.
And appreciate.
And appreciation. Exactly. Yeah, a relationship from appreciation as opposed to a relationship of exploitation.
Yes.
And looking at that, like, in our daily lives, like, are we appreciating the things that we have, or are we exploiting them? Even in our human relationships. I mean, if we think about ourselves and the way that we deal with our friends and our colleagues or whatever, think about ourselves as a mycelium underground. And are we, forming a symbiotic relationship with people, or are we forming an antagonistic relationship? Are we fighting with each other, So that's kind of on the philosophical level. I would say in terms of, health, take more mushrooms. Eat
Yeah.
more mushrooms. Eat mushrooms. That's the solution right there. But yeah, I think just education is a big deal. Obviously, there's a lot of need for funding this type of work. So if somebody is like donating to various causes, of course, donating to causes in the world of fire mitigation and all that type of stuff is a really good cause.
Are there any local organizations that work specifically with you that
Yeah, so
Like
so we
nonprofits?
work with the Boulder Watershed Collective. That's an organization based out of Boulder, and they're going to be partnering with us to do our pilot trial up in a mountain town outside of Gold Hill for fire mitigation. So definitely,
Sweet. That's-
if you
That
donate to
area
them,
definitely needs it.
yes, it sure does. But yeah, make a note on mushroom mitigation. We work with EcoCycle here in Boulder.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure if they're a nonprofit or not, but so various organizations and
Cool.
yeah,
And
just
hopefully the city soon.
yeah, hopefully we're
Or the
we're
state
working on it.
too.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
can you get like, are there any like grants or anything?
There's so many grants. Yeah, there's so many grants, and it's a process.
Sure.
I'm pretty busy, and so I have a lot of stuff going on. But when it comes down to it, it's like partnerships are the most important thing. We have to work with partners. We have to be part of a matrix, and that's the way that we
and
can
community.
be successful.
Like we all just have to like spread love. And
Yes.
Do you have like a volunteer program? Can people volunteer with your organization?
I don't host volunteers right now. I would say if you reach out, if you're interested in that kind of thing, bouldermushroom.com is my website. And, I'll let you know if there are certain days that we're doing volunteer work. There are
wanna
other
come on a
organizations.
forage soon. I wanna
Yeah,
forage
we
with
can
you.
go foraging. Yeah, it's about
Yes.
time to go foraging. Well, I'll take you guys up into
I really
the
want
creeks,
to.
and right now the oyster mushrooms are coming out, so we can wander around in
nice.
the creek and look under wood and try to find oyster mushrooms and morels and stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, I've always wanted to find morels.
All right, yeah, we'll go.
Sweet, but it's really only like spring that they're around in
Yeah.
Colorado because of the weather.
Well, we were talking about it while you were talking to the guy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so basically it starts now. The mushroom season starts in April and then goes until September. But the thing about Colorado is that it goes up in elevation. So right now you're going to start finding mushrooms down here in the plains, like around 5,000, 5,500 feet elevation. But then they'll go up and up and up all the way until September, to where you'll find stuff up at like 11,000 feet elevation up in the high mountains. So
Yeah.
as it warms up in the mountains, the mushrooms grow more there. So I would say my favorite time of the year is like July, August, where there's just mushrooms everywhere up in the mountains. That's the best.
Wow.
nice.
Okay, cool.
Do you have like organized trips set up for this
Yeah.
year? Okay.
Yeah. So I guide a lot of forays and mushroom walks. The best way to find out about that stuff is just to sign up to the newsletter on my website, which is bouldermushroom.com.
Sweet.
And yeah, I do classes as well. I do some lectures just on mushroom identification. So yeah, that's a big part of my organization is education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the most crucial. I mean, that's like one of the main reasons why I'm doing the podcast, because like I just feel like education is like the first and most important step
Yes.
for a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear around just going out and picking
Fear of
mushrooms.
the
So having
unknown.
someone tell you like this is not poison.
Oh, it's
Clutch.
well, it's literally
Yeah.
just like well, I follow random like forager people online, and this cool guy, he always posts like, okay, these are two, like this is a morel and this is a fake morel that's
Yeah.
actually poisonous, and like this is what you should look for. But I'm like, I literally would need to like be watching the video as like I'm
Yeah.
looking at it. I'm like, I'm not gonna remember this.
Yeah, it's just, it's a process and it takes a while. And there's
Right.
certain mushrooms that are easy to identify. There's other mushrooms that are not as easy to identify. So it's just about getting out there and starting to learn and
Yeah.
make a friend that knows what they're doing. And
You're our friend now.
yeah, all right, we'll be friends. I'll be your mushroom friend.
Yay!
Yes.
And like you got to start somewhere. I feel like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still feel like I know nothing, but I've also like been researching for several years now.
Yep,
But it's like the
yep.
more you know, the more you know you don't know.
That's true. That is very true.
So,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, but there are certain, like, it's kind of funny because there are like various cultures where people are really crazy about mushrooms. I'll tell you one story. Like before we wrap up, I was doing this mushroom walk a couple of years ago, and we had like maybe 15, 20 people. It was a decent sized group, and we had ventured out into the forest, and we had this older woman with us. She was the oldest member of the group, and she was from northern Italy, from the Alps.
Yes.
And we were all kind of walking together and talking about mushrooms, but it was at the very end of the season and we really weren't seeing much. And we all came back to the parking lot at the time that we were supposed to wrap up and kind of comparing what we'd found. And then we realized that the woman was missing. And we were like, oh gosh, what should we do? And we were kind of starting to organize like a search party to go out there and search for this woman that we were concerned about. And then all of a sudden she emerges from the opposite side of the forest that we had all gone. And she had found the one prized edible mushroom of the whole day. And she was like, yeah, I don't know what you guys were doing. I went by myself and I found, what I wanted to find. So good luck.
Wow, nice.
So sometimes you just have to go on your own path.
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine is her family is from Russia, and her grandparents, parents, like they go out and forage every weekend. It's just like that's what they did back home.
I want to do that here.
Right.
Like,
I know. Yeah, it's fun.
do
It
it.
brings people together, and it's like, it's just a good way to be out and like form a relationship with nature. I mean, that's kind of my thing is like, it's nice to go out and to like have a relationship with the environment that you're walking through, not just like a visitor or a tourist, but you're involved in the environment. And obviously, there's a certain ethic about not just taking everything.
I was just gonna ask,
Yeah.
like, how much do you leave and how much do you take?
Honorable harvest.
Yeah, I always leave something, but that's a pretty contentious point of debate for some mycologists, just because the purpose of mushrooms is to come up to spread spores, and they all rot away within a very short time anyway. And so, in theory, from a scientific perspective, harvesting mushrooms is not disturbing the organism. It's actually helping to spread the spores because it's kind of like picking an apple off of a tree.
Oh, yeah. So then it like re-sprouts.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you could imagine like if you walked around with an apple that dropped seeds, like as you walked around, that's
Johnny
kind of like,
Appleseed.
Yeah. It's sort of like that. Yeah. But on the flip
We're going to call you
side,
Zach Mushroom Seed.
all right, cool. I like
Mushroom
it.
spawn.
Give
excuse
me a t-shirt that says that. I'll wear it. Yep. But I mean, the main ethic that I kind of try to talk to people is one, walking through the forest in a way that's respectful. And actually a big one for me recently has been picking up trash, because that's something
That's
that
huge
just
for me.
blows my mind is when I walk through the forest and I find these trash piles.
It makes me so sad and
And
upset.
the
I
fact
keep
that
a trash bag in my
the
bag
fact
now.
that the trash is there is one thing, but also the fact that nobody picks it up is another thing. I'm like, you love the forest. I mean, why are you accepting the fact that it's polluted? Just pick it up.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's actually, I'm trying to organize some trash pickup mushroom forays this year as well. So we'll go out and look for mushrooms and pick up trash.
Okay,
Sign me up for
we
those
would love to
ones.
be a
Yeah.
part of this with you and
Yeah.
help promote or whatever. Like
Cool.
even just be a part of it with
Yeah.
you. Like would love this.
Yeah.
We would
Sounds
love
fun.
to be extra hands to
Cool.
pick up garbage for
Yeah,
sure.
we need as many hands as we can to.
And continue
yeah, it's
learning
really
and
Yeah.
building community.
Yep,
These
yep.
are all mycelium.
That's right.
Exactly.
See?
Yeah,
Yep.
I definitely notice when I'm like foraging versus just hiking, like my headphones are out, my feet or like my eyes are on the ground. I'm very with the situation.
It's an
So
attunement for sure.
It's like I'm in a different way
Yes.
in nature.
It's like
Yes.
all
Really cool.
senses are involved, I feel like, when you're foraging.
Totally.
It
I'm
is.
like, I'm hungry. What can I
Yep.
eat? Like,
Yep.
it's definitely a different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Do you forage for other stuff while you're out there, like berries or
Oh, yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
other herbs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, mushrooms are my specialty for sure, but I definitely like to look for wild plants. I mean, the ones around here, we'll get raspberries, and
Yeah.
the later part of the year, we'll get rose hips and
Yeah.
nettles and service berries. So, yeah, I love to get all kinds of
Nice.
stuff.
Amazing.
What restaurants do you sell to?
Oh, yeah.
So the big one is Leaf Vegetarian Restaurant
Sure.
in
Delicious.
Boulder.
Street.
Yeah, and right now they're taking like a substantial part of what I grow, just because they
Like, how
use
much
so many
percentage?
mushrooms. I would say they take probably like at least 50%
Wow.
of what I grow right now. There's also some other smaller businesses, like there's a food truck that sets up here in Boulder near the Vision Quest Brewery, and they buy mushrooms from me. Recently, somebody who makes samosas started to get mushrooms from me. There's actually a chocolate business that's really cool. They're called Moksha, and they make CBD chocolate too, but they're doing a functional mushroom bar. So they
That's awesome.
buy mushrooms and dry them out and put them in their chocolate. There's some other restaurants that we work with sort of like on a less frequent basis, but those are kind of like some of the regular buyers. And then we also work with our farm in Longmont, Olin Farms, and they sell mushrooms at their farm stand there.
Yeah.
So, our approach has been to just create a lot of like diverse partnerships, and everybody has a different need for the mushrooms. I have worked at the farmers market for a while, and I've considered to do farmers markets, but right now it's just not quite the move for us. It's better to just work directly with the people that want them, because there's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like insatiable. The
Yeah.
craving for mushrooms.
It
feels
is
like so.
indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can people come to like your lab or?
Yeah, do you have a storefront?
Yeah, so I don't have a storefront, but I do sales, so I have an online order form, and you can also email me about sales, especially like if it's a regular type of order, it's better to email, and then, we'll negotiate, like, because I do wholesaling and stuff like that. But yeah, the best way to do it is just to order off the website or to send me an email, but I definitely sell locally. We're going to be also doing some pop-up markets over the summer. There's a Moxie feed and seed in North Boulder, and likely going to be setting up some
Moxie.
Yeah, they're great. So, and we're going to sell some lion's mane there as well.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so
here we
much,
go.
Zach. This was so informative.
Well,
Yeah.
we always have a question that
Oh my
we
God,
ask
I
everybody. We
I
ask
forgot.
2 questions to everybody.
It's
Okay.
normally like cannabis based though, so I didn't know.
Right.
That's why I asked about
We
future
did,
of
yeah. So we already did the
mushrooms.
future of the mushroom industry and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
we have a question.
Oh, yeah.
We usually say if you could smoke weed,
Or consume cannabis.
but you can, if you could
Consume
chat-
mushrooms.
yeah, consume edible or psilocybin or however you want to,
Or go on a foraging walk with anyone in the
If
world.
you could go on a foraging walk
dead
with anyone
or
in the
alive.
world, dead or alive, not family, who would it be?
Wow, that's a good question.
Sorry, that
Man.
was a butchered.
Yeah, it's like we didn't really think about how we would sub the cannabis.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I feel like of course, the thing that comes to mind is Paul Stamets,
Pauly,
just because he's just the man. If I can go on
I wanna meet
a
him
foray
so
with
bad.
Paul Stamets, that sounds pretty fun. And then for whatever reason, like Walt Whitman came to my mind. I don't
my
know
God,
if you've like
that's a
read
good
any
one.
of
I
his
have.
poetry,
Yeah, for
but like
sure.
to go out into
American
the woods
literature
with
was my
him.
minor.
Okay, yeah, I've got a poetry background too, and so like something about Walt, I
Yes.
feel like he could really have some wild stuff to say when
He
we're
would-
out there in
yeah.
the woods.
Definitely elevate the
Yeah.
experience.
So my answer might change tomorrow, but for now I'll say Paul and Walt.
Those are really good
yeah,
ones.
that's a crew. So foray, that's what you call like a foraging hike.
Yep.
Nice.
Let's go
Cute.
for a foray.
Yep.
I love that.
Time to foray.
I'm going to
Cool.
use that.
Oh. Well, Zach, this has been
Thank
awesome.
you
This has
so
been really
much.
cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's just fun to talk
Yeah.
about what we're doing and share it with everybody. So
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and incredible insight.
Of course.
Yeah,
This
where
is
can
so
people
knowledgeable.
Yeah, where can people find you?
So find us on bouldermushroom.com. That's my website. You can reach out
Instagram?
to me. Yeah, if we have Instagram, that's just boulder_mushroom. Facebook, Boulder Mushroom. Yeah, that's the best way to find me. So don't hesitate.
Amazing.
Reach out. Eat more mushrooms.
Nice. Yes.
Hell yeah. Eat mushrooms and also
Stay high.